Memphis, Tennessee, December 23, 1976. Jennifer Walsh was 24 years old, standing outside the gates of Graceland in freezing rain at 2 a.m. She'd been there for 8 hours, hoping to catch a glimpse of Elvis through the window. She was soaking wet, shivering, and alone. Then the gates opened. Elvis Presley walked out in his bathrobe carrying 2 mugs of hot chocolate. What happened in the next hour would become the most intimate fan encounter Elvis ever had, and nobody knew about it until 30 years later. The girl who waited. Jennifer Walsh had driven 14 hours from Cleveland, Ohio to Memphis, Tennessee with one purpose: to see Graceland. Not to meet Elvis. She knew that was impossible. Not to get an autograph or a photo. Just to see the place where her hero lived. Just to stand outside and feel closer to the music that had saved her life. Jennifer's past year had been the worst of her life. In January 1976, her younger brother Danny had died in a car accident. He was only 19. In March, Jennifer's fiancé had broken off their engagement, saying he couldn't handle her grief. In July, Jennifer had been laid off from her job as a secretary due to company downsizing. By December, Jennifer felt like she was drowning. She'd wake up every morning with no reason to get out of bed. No job, no relationship, no brother, just empty days and emptier nights. The only thing that had kept Jennifer going through that terrible year was Elvis's music, specifically his gospel recordings. She'd play "How Great Thou Art" and "Peace in the Valley" on repeat, letting the music wash over her when the grief felt too heavy to carry. "Your brother would want you to keep living," her mother would say. "You can't give up." But Jennifer didn't know how to keep living. Everything felt pointless. Then, in early December, Jennifer made a decision. She'd take what little money she had left, drive to Memphis, and see Graceland. Just once. Just to stand outside the place where Elvis lived, where that beautiful music came from. Maybe it would help. Maybe it would give her some peace. She left Cleveland on December 22nd, driving through the night, arriving in Memphis early on December 23rd. She found Graceland easily. Everyone in Memphis knew where Elvis lived. But when Jennifer arrived at those famous gates, she couldn't bring herself to leave. The vigil. Jennifer parked her car across the street from Graceland at 6 p.m. on December 23rd. She just sat there, looking at the mansion through the gates, feeling strangely comforted by being so close to something that mattered to her. "I'll just stay for an hour," she told herself. Just long enough to feel something besides sadness. But an hour passed, and Jennifer didn't leave. The lights in Graceland were on. She could see the outline of the mansion, could imagine Elvis inside, maybe listening to music, maybe preparing for Christmas. Around 8 p.m. it started to rain. Not hard at first, just a cold December drizzle. Jennifer should have gotten back in her car, but she didn't. She just stood there by the gates, hands wrapped around the iron bars, looking at the mansion. The rain got harder. By 9 p.m., it was a steady, cold downpour. Jennifer was soaking wet, shivering, but she still couldn't make herself leave. "What am I doing?" she whispered to herself. "This is crazy. Elvis doesn't even know I exist. I'm standing in the rain outside his house like some kind of stalker." But she stayed, because leaving meant going back to an empty hotel room, going back to emptiness. And standing here, even in the freezing rain, felt better than that. By 10 p.m., Jennifer's teeth were chattering. Her clothes were completely soaked through. Her hair was plastered to her face. She knew she looked pathetic. She knew she should leave. Just a little longer, she told herself. Just until midnight. Then I'll go. But Jennifer had no idea that someone inside Graceland was watching her. The man who noticed Elvis couldn't sleep. It was after midnight, and he was restless. A common problem for him in those days. He'd been upstairs in his bedroom, reading, when he'd gotten up to look out the window. That's when he saw her, a young woman standing outside the gates in the pouring rain. Elvis watched for a few minutes, confused. Why was she just standing there? It was freezing outside. It was the middle of the night. What was she doing? Elvis called down to the security guard stationed at the gate. "Hey, Charlie, you see that girl out there?" "Yeah, boss. She's been there for hours, since about 6 o'clock. I asked if she was okay, if she needed help. She said she was fine, just wanted to see the house. I figured she'd leave when it started raining, but she didn't." "Hours?" Elvis said. "She's been standing in the rain for hours?" "Yes, sir. I was about to call the police, have them move her along. She's not causing trouble, but it's not right for her to be out there like that." "No," Elvis said quickly. "Don't call the police. Let me think for a minute." Elvis hung up and went back to the window. The young woman was still there, gripping the gate, staring at the house. She looked so small and lost, standing there in the rain. Elvis knew that look. He'd seen it before, on fans who were going through something terrible, who came to Graceland not because they wanted something from him, but because they needed something. Connection, hope, a reminder that beauty still existed in the world. "She's hurting," Elvis said aloud to himself. "Something's really wrong." Elvis made a decision. He threw on his bathrobe over his pajamas, put on some slippers, and headed downstairs to the kitchen. What he did next surprised everyone who worked at Graceland that night. The hot chocolate Elvis found his cook, Nancy, still up and preparing food for the next day. "Nancy, can you make 2 mugs of hot chocolate? The good kind, with whipped cream." Nancy looked at Elvis like he'd lost his mind. "It's 2 in the morning. Who's the hot chocolate for?" "There's a girl outside in the rain. She's been there for hours. I'm going to bring her inside." "Elvis, you can't. Security won't let—" "I don't care what security says. That girl is freezing and soaking wet, and she's been standing at my gate for 8 hours. Something's wrong. I need to talk to her." Nancy knew better than to argue with Elvis when he'd made up his mind. She made 2 mugs of the best hot chocolate Elvis had ever tasted, rich, warm, topped with homemade whipped cream. Elvis took the mugs and walked out the front door. His security team immediately moved to stop him. "Boss, you can't go out there. We haven't vetted that girl. She could be—" "She's been standing in freezing rain for 8 hours, Elvis said. "She's not a threat. She's just a fan who needs help. Now let me through." The guards knew Elvis well enough to recognize when he wasn't going to be talked out of something. They opened the gates. Elvis walked out into the rain in his bathrobe and slippers, carrying 2 mugs of hot chocolate, and approached the young woman who was still standing there, shivering. Jennifer's face when she saw Elvis walking toward her was something he'd never forget. The meeting. Jennifer heard the gates opening and assumed security was finally going to make her leave. She was about to apologize, about to explain that she was leaving anyway, when she looked up and saw him, Elvis Presley, walking toward her in a bathrobe, carrying hot chocolate. For a moment, Jennifer thought she was hallucinating. She was so cold and wet that maybe her brain had started creating visions, because this couldn't be real. Elvis Presley was not walking out of his house at 2 a.m. to bring her hot chocolate. "Hi," Elvis said gently, stopping a few feet away from her. "You've been standing out here for a while. You must be freezing." Jennifer couldn't speak. She just stared at him, mouth open, completely unable to process what was happening. Elvis smiled, that famous warm smile. "It's okay. You're not in trouble. I just thought you might want something warm to drink." He held out one of the mugs. Jennifer took it with shaking hands. She was trembling so hard from the cold that she almost dropped the mug. "Come inside," Elvis said. "You're soaking wet. You're going to get sick out here." I can't. I'm not—" Jennifer couldn't form a complete sentence. "Yes, you can," Elvis said gently. "I'm inviting you. Come on, let's get you warmed up." He started walking back toward the gates, then turned when he realized Jennifer wasn't following. "You coming?" Jennifer's legs felt like they wouldn't work, but somehow she started walking, following Elvis Presley through the gates of Graceland, into his home, at 2 a.m. in her soaking wet clothes. If you could have 1 hour of completely honest conversation with someone you admire, no cameras, no publicity, just 2 people talking, who would it be, and what would you ask them? Share in the comments. Sometimes the conversations we need most are the ones that happen when nobody's watching. Inside Graceland, Elvis led Jennifer into Graceland's living room, that famous room with the white furniture and the iconic decor. He pointed to a chair. "Sit, drink your hot chocolate. I'll get you a towel." Jennifer sat, still unable to believe this was happening. She took a sip of the hot chocolate, and it was the most delicious thing she'd ever tasted. Warm and rich and exactly what she needed. Elvis returned with a thick, soft towel. "Here, dry off as best you can. Nancy, that's my cook. She's getting some dry clothes for you. You're about the same size as my daughter Lisa Marie." "I can't. I don't want to impose," Jennifer managed to say. Elvis sat down across from her holding his own mug of hot chocolate. "You're not imposing. I invited you in, remember? Now, I have to ask, what were you doing out there? You've been standing in the rain for 8 hours. Charlie told me you've been there since 6 o'clock. Jennifer looked down at her hot chocolate. "I just wanted to see where you lived. I drove here from Cleveland. I know it sounds crazy. I wasn't trying to bother you or—" "You drove 14 hours from Cleveland to stand outside my house in the rain?" Elvis's voice was gentle, not accusatory. "That's a long way to come. And you didn't try to get my attention. You didn't knock on the gate or cause a scene. You just stood there." "Why?" Jennifer felt tears starting to form. "Your music, it's helped me through a really hard year. I lost my brother in January. Danny, he was 19. Car accident." Elvis's expression immediately softened. "I'm so sorry. That's the worst thing that can happen. And then my fiancé left me, said he couldn't handle my grief, and I lost my job, and I didn't know what to do anymore. Your gospel music was the only thing that made me feel less alone. So I thought, if I could just see Graceland, just be close to where that music comes from, maybe it would help." Elvis was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Did it help?" Jennifer looked up at him, surprised by the question. "What?" "Standing out there in the rain for 8 hours. Did it help? Do you feel better?" Jennifer thought about it. "I felt less alone, even though I was alone. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense," Elvis said softly. "That's how I feel a lot of the time. Surrounded by people but feeling completely alone. Music helps. Creating it, listening to it, it connects us to something bigger than ourselves." They sat there for a moment, 2 people who felt alone, connected by honesty. The conversation, Nancy appeared with dry clothes, sweatpants, and a Graceland sweatshirt. Jennifer changed in the bathroom, and when she returned, Elvis had made himself comfortable on the couch, guitar in hand. "You like gospel music?" Elvis asked. "I love it," Jennifer said. "Your version of How Great Thou Art is my favorite song ever recorded." Elvis smiled. "That's my favorite too. It's the only song I recorded that made me feel like I was doing something important, not entertaining, connecting, to God, to the music, to something eternal." He started playing softly, not How Great Thou Art, but another gospel song, Peace in the Valley. As he played, he talked. "You know what the hardest part of fame is?" Elvis said. "It's not the lack of privacy or the constant attention. It's that everyone wants something from you. An autograph, a photo, a piece of you. And after a while, you start to wonder if anyone actually sees you, the real you, or if they just see Elvis the performer." "I see you," Jennifer said quietly. "The real you, the one who walked out in the rain at 2 a.m. to make sure a stranger was okay. That's who you really are." Elvis stopped playing and looked at her. "How do you know that?" "You just met me. Because you didn't have to do this. You could have had security move me along. You could have ignored me. But you noticed I was hurting, and you cared. That's not Elvis the performer. That's Elvis the human being." Elvis was quiet for a long moment. "You know, I've met thousands of fans, maybe hundreds of thousands. But most of those meetings are 30 seconds. Shake hands, sign something, take a photo, move on. This is the first time in years I've had a real conversation with a fan, where we're just talking, like people." "Is it weird?" Jennifer asked. "No," Elvis said, smiling. "It's nice, really nice." For the next hour, they talked about everything, the things they shared. Elvis and Jennifer talked about loss. Elvis about his mother Gladys, who died in 1958, and whose absence he still felt every day. Jennifer about Danny, whose death had broken something fundamental inside her. They talked about loneliness, how you can be surrounded by people and still feel completely isolated, how success doesn't cure that, how grief doesn't either. They talked about music, how it was the only thing that made sense when everything else fell apart, how a song could say things you couldn't put into words, how listening to music could make you feel connected to everyone else who'd ever felt what you were feeling. "Danny loved your music too," Jennifer said. "We used to sing Can't Help Falling in Love together when we were kids. After he died, I couldn't listen to that song anymore. It hurt too much." Elvis picked up his guitar again. "You know what I think? I think you should reclaim that song. Not as a memory of loss, but as a memory of love. Your brother's gone, but the love you shared isn't. That song can be a way to connect to that love instead of just the loss." He started playing Can't Help Falling in Love, slowly, gently, stripped of all the performance and production. Just a man with a guitar singing for one person. Jennifer started crying, but it wasn't the painful crying of the past year. It was the cathartic crying of something breaking open inside her, letting light in. When Elvis finished the song, he said, "Danny would want you to keep living. He'd want you to find joy again. He'd want you to remember him with love, not just with pain." "That's what my mother says," Jennifer whispered. "Your mother's right. And I'm going to tell you something else. Standing in the rain for 8 hours because you're in pain, that's not the answer. You need to talk to someone, a therapist, a counselor, a priest, I don't care who, but you need help processing this grief or it's going to drown you. I don't have money for therapy. I don't even have a job anymore." Elvis stood up and walked out of the room. Jennifer thought maybe she'd said something wrong, that he was done with the conversation, but he returned a minute later with a piece of paper. "This is the name and number of a therapist in Cleveland. She's good. She helped someone I know through a really dark time. I'm going to call her tomorrow and set up 10 sessions for you. Paid for. You just have to show up." Jennifer stared at the paper. "I can't accept this. That's too much." "Yes, you can," Elvis said firmly. "Jennifer, you drove 14 hours and stood in freezing rain for 8 hours because you were so lost you didn't know what else to do. That tells me you're desperate for help. Let me help you, please." Jennifer took the paper with shaking hands. The gift. It was almost 4 a.m. now. Jennifer needed to get back to her hotel. She'd be driving back to Cleveland later that day. As Elvis walked her to the door, he stopped and said, "Wait here. I have something for you." He disappeared upstairs and returned a few minutes later, carrying something wrapped in tissue paper. "This is for you." Jennifer carefully unwrapped it. Inside was a scarf, one of Elvis's stage scarves, the kind he'd throw to crowds during concerts. It was silk, beautiful, and it smelled faintly of his cologne. "I can't take this," Jennifer said. "These are worth—" "I don't care what they're worth," Elvis interrupted. "I want you to have it. When you're having hard days, and you will have hard days, I want you to hold this scarf and remember tonight. Remember that you're not alone. Remember that people care about you, even people who just met you. Remember that your life matters." Jennifer hugged the scarf to her chest, crying again. "Thank you. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for caring." Elvis hugged her. A real, genuine hug. "You take care of yourself," Jennifer Walsh from Cleveland. "You go to those therapy sessions. You let people help you. And you remember Danny with love, not just pain. Can you do that?" "I'll try. That's all any of us can do." trottoir. As Elvis walked Jennifer to the gate, he said one more thing that would stay with her forever: the promise. At the gate, with the rain finally stopping and the first hints of dawn appearing in the sky, Elvis said, "Jennifer, I want you to promise me something. Anything. Promise me that 1 year from now, you'll write me a letter. Tell me how you're doing. Tell me if the therapy helped. Tell me if you're finding your way back to life. Will you do that?" "I promise." "Good, because I'm going to worry about you. I need to know you're okay." Elvis opened the gate, and Jennifer walked through, back to her car, back to her hotel, back to Cleveland. But she wasn't the same person who'd arrived at Graceland 8 hours earlier. And Elvis was right to worry, because Jennifer's journey back to life would be harder than either of them imagined. The year after, Jennifer kept her promise. She went to the therapist Elvis had arranged. It was hard. Therapy always is. She had to face things about Danny's death she'd been avoiding. She had to process the anger she felt at her ex-fiancé. She had to rebuild her sense of self-worth after losing her job. But slowly, over months, Jennifer started to heal. Not completely. You never heal completely from losing someone you love, but enough to function, enough to hope. She got a new job in March 1977. Nothing glamorous, receptionist at a dental office, but it was work, and it gave her purpose. She started reconnecting with friends she'd pushed away during her grief. Started going to church again. Started singing "Can't Help Falling in Love Without Crying." And on December 23, 1977, exactly 1 year after her night at Graceland, Jennifer wrote Elvis a letter. "Dear Elvis, 1 year ago today, you found me standing outside Graceland in the rain, completely lost and broken. You brought me inside. You gave me hot chocolate and dry clothes and the first real conversation I'd had in months. You listened to me. You saw me. You helped me. I promised I'd write to you 1 year later and tell you how I'm doing. So here it is. I'm doing better. Not great, but better. I went to therapy like you told me to. It was hard, but it helped. I'm working again. I'm singing again. I'm living again. I still miss Danny every single day, but now I remember him with love instead of just pain, like you said I should. I play Can't Help Falling in Love, and I remember singing it with him, and it makes me smile instead of cry. You saved my life that night. Not dramatically. You didn't pull me back from a ledge or anything like that, but you saw someone who was drowning in grief, and you threw me a lifeline. You showed me that people still care, that kindness still exists, that I'm not alone in this world. I don't know if you'll ever read this letter. You probably get thousands of letters, and you won't remember one random girl you talked to for an hour, but I remember. I'll remember for the rest of my life. Thank you for being a light in my darkest night. With gratitude, Jennifer Walsh, Cleveland, Ohio, PS. I still have the scarf. I sleep with it on my pillow on hard nights. Jennifer mailed the letter to Graceland on December 23, 1977. She didn't expect a response. She just needed to keep her promise. But Elvis never received that letter. The news. On August 16, 1977, Elvis Presley died at Graceland. He was 42 years old. Jennifer heard the news on the radio while she was at work. She had to excuse herself and go cry in the bathroom for 20 minutes. The man who'd saved her life was gone, and he'd never know that she'd kept her promise, that she'd gotten better, that his kindness had mattered. Jennifer tried to mail another letter explaining what had happened, apologizing for sending her first letter too late. But in the chaos after Elvis's death, with Graceland being flooded with letters from millions of fans, Jennifer never knew if anyone at Graceland actually read her letters. For years, Jennifer carried a quiet guilt. Elvis had asked her to let him know she was okay, and she'd waited too long. He died never knowing whether his help had made a difference. It doesn't matter if he knew, Jennifer's therapist told her. What matters is that he helped you, that his kindness changed your life. You honor him by living well, not by torturing yourself over timing. So Jennifer lived well. She got married in 1982 to a kind man who loved her, despite her scars. She had 2 children. She became a grief counselor herself, helping other people who'd lost siblings, helping them find their way back to life. And she never told anyone, not even her husband, about that night at Graceland. It felt too sacred to share, too private, a gift that existed only between her and Elvis, until 2006, when everything changed. In 2006, a documentary crew was making a film about Elvis's charitable work. They were going through archives at Graceland when they found something unexpected, a file labeled Jennifer Walsh, 1976. Inside the file were notes in Elvis's handwriting. Jennifer Walsh, Cleveland, Ohio. Brother died, Jan 1976. Danny, age 19. Fiancé left her, lost job, severe grief, standing outside in rain 12/23/76. Brought her inside, set up therapy sessions with Dr. Morris in Cleveland. 10 sessions, prepaid, gave her stage. Scarf, asked her to write in 1 year. Make sure to follow up if she writes. Also in the file was Jennifer's letter from December 1977, the one she'd written exactly 1 year after meeting Elvis. The envelope had been opened. Someone had read it, but Elvis had already been dead for 4 months when the letter arrived. The documentary crew crew tracked down Jennifer Walsh, now 54 years old, living in Cleveland with her family, working as a grief counselor. When they called her, Jennifer was shocked. "How did you find me? How did you know about that night?" "We found Elvis's notes. He documented your meeting. He was planning to follow up with you. We'd like to interview you for our documentary if you're willing." Jennifer agreed. And when the documentary aired, millions of people heard the story for the first time. The Truth Revealed. The documentary, called Elvis: The Hours Nobody Saw, featured Jennifer's story prominently. She appeared on camera, now a confident, healthy woman in her 50s, telling the story of that night in 1976. "I was standing outside Graceland in the freezing rain because I was so lost I didn't know what else to do," Jennifer said in the documentary. "My brother had died. My life had fallen apart. Elvis's music was the only thing keeping me going, and I thought if I could just be near where that music came from, maybe it would help. Elvis saw me. He could have had security remove me. Instead, he brought me hot chocolate and invited me into his home at 2 a.m. in his bathrobe. We talked for an hour about loss and loneliness and music. He set up therapy for me. He gave me a scarf to remember him by. He saved my life, not dramatically, but quietly, by seeing someone who was invisible and treating them like they mattered. I became a grief counselor because of that night, because Elvis showed me that sometimes the most important thing you can do for someone who's suffering is just see them, acknowledge their pain, sit with them in it, remind them they're not alone. I've helped over 500 people through grief in my career. Every single one of them is connected to that night at Graceland. Elvis created ripples that are still spreading 30 years later." The documentary also showed something Jennifer hadn't known. Elvis had written a letter to Dr. Morrison, the therapist, explaining Jennifer's situation and asking her to take special care with this patient. The letter said, "This young woman lost her brother and is drowning in grief. She stood outside my house for 8 hours in the rain because she didn't know what else to do. Please help her. She's worth saving." When Jennifer saw that letter on screen during the documentary premiere, she cried. Because Elvis hadn't just helped her that night. He'd advocated for her. He'd made sure she got the care she needed. And there was one more surprise. At the end of the documentary, Jennifer showed the scarf Elvis had given her that night, still carefully preserved, still carrying the faint scent of his cologne 30 years later. "I've slept with this scarf on hard nights for 30 years, Jennifer said, holding it gently. "It reminds me that kindness exists, that people care, that I'm not alone. My children know about this scarf. They know the story of the night their mother met Elvis, and I've taught them what Elvis taught me. When you see someone suffering, you don't look away. You don't cross the street. You walk toward them. You ask if they're okay. You offer them hot chocolate and dry clothes in an hour of genuine conversation. That's what Elvis did for me, and that's what I try to do for others." The documentary ended with Jennifer working with a client, a young woman who'd lost her sister, demonstrating the same compassionate listening that Elvis had shown her. The documentary won an Emmy, but more importantly, it sparked a movement, the 2 a.m. Hot Chocolate Challenge. People committed to noticing the suffering around them and doing something about it, even when it was inconvenient. Who in your life is standing outside in the rain, metaphorically speaking, waiting for someone to notice they're struggling? Maybe it's time to open the gate and invite them in for hot chocolate. Share in the comments if you're going to take the 2 a.m. challenge and reach out to someone who's hurting. The legacy Jennifer Walsh is 72 years old now, retired from her grief counseling practice, but still active in teaching others how to support people through loss. She still has the scarf Elvis gave her. She's donated it to be displayed at Graceland, but only after she dies. "I need it while I'm alive," she says. "It still gives me comfort on hard days." Jennifer's story has been shared millions of times online. It's used in grief counseling training programs as an example of the power of simple presence, how just showing up for someone can save their life. And every December 23rd, Jennifer stands outside the gates of Graceland, not in rain this time, but in gratitude. She places flowers at the gate and says a prayer of thanks for the man who saw her when she was invisible. "Elvis changed my life in 1 hour," Jennifer says. "He could have ignored me. He could have had security move me along. Instead, he brought me inside and talked to me like I mattered, like my pain mattered, like my life was worth saving. And then he made sure I got the help I needed. He followed through. He advocated for me even when I wasn't there." That's who Elvis really was. Not the Vegas performer or the movie star. The man who noticed suffering and did something about it. The man who walked out in the rain at 2 a.m. because someone needed help. Jennifer's children, now adults with children of their own, have continued her work. One is a therapist. One is a hospice chaplain. One runs a grief support group for young adults who've lost siblings. All three of them credit their career choices to their mother's story. Mom taught us that you can't walk past suffering, Jennifer's daughter says. You can't ignore people who are hurting just because it's inconvenient or uncomfortable. That lesson came from Elvis. It's his legacy, passed through our mother, now living through us. That's the real measure of 1 hour at 2 a.m. Not the hour itself, but the 50 years of ripples that followed. December 23, 1976, a young woman stood outside Graceland for 8 hours in freezing rain because she was so lost she didn't know what else to do. A famous singer could have ignored her, could have had security remove her, could have gone to bed and thought nothing of it. Instead, Elvis walked out at 2 a.m. in his bathrobe with hot chocolate, invited her inside, listened to her story, connected her with help, and gave her a reason to keep living. That hour changed Jennifer's life, which changed 500 clients' lives, which changed countless others through the documentary and the movement it inspired. All because Elvis noticed, because he cared, because he acted. Think about that. How many suffering people do we walk past every day? How many people are standing in the rain, literally or metaphorically, hoping someone will see them? We're all so busy, so focused on our own lives, that we miss the people who are drowning right in front of us. The coworker who's struggling, the neighbor who's isolated, the friend who's barely holding on. Elvis showed us what it means to notice, to care, to act, even when it's 2 a.m., even when it's inconvenient, even when you're famous and busy and have a million other things demanding your attention, because the person standing outside your gate in the rain might be waiting for someone, anyone, to see them and remind them they matter. You don't need to be Elvis Presley to do this. You don't need Graceland or hot chocolate or stage scarves. You just need to notice, to care, to reach out. Maybe someone you know is standing in the rain right now, hoping someone will open the gate. Subscribe to Elvis Presley Legacy Stories to discover more moments that prove noticing someone's pain and acting on it can save a life. Share this story with someone who might be struggling. Let them know you see them. And take the 2 a.m. hot chocolate challenge. Reach out to someone who's hurting. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Do it now. You might save a life. Because Jennifer Walsh was drowning in grief, and Elvis threw her a lifeline. She spent 50 years passing that lifeline to others, all because someone noticed her standing in the rain and decided to do something about it. Your turn. Who will you notice today?